So as I mentioned, this Sedra of Chukat is a transition. What do we mean? Well, Miriam's going to die, Aaron's going to die, and the verdict that Moses will die before he enters the land of Israel is set. So all three leaders will be gone before the people of Israel enter the land of Israel, before they enter the promised land. So we'll look for a few moments at these three, two of the deaths and the one that's predicted. Professor Erica Brown, one of the great contemporary commentators, what she points out is if we look closely, we'll see that their deaths were a reflection of how they lived. That's the connection that she makes. So let's take a look at Miriam first. So we read about it today. We arrive at the wilderness of Zin. On the first month, the people stay at Kadesh, and Miriam dies there. Vatikaver Sham, and she's buried there. The community, we're told immediately afterwards, is without water, and they complain to Moses and Aaron and another rebellion. So what's missing in this passage? What's missing is there's no mention of mourning Miriam. There's no mention that anyone took notice. There's no comment on her death. In fact, there's very few comments on Miriam's life at all. All we hear is that when she died, we ran out of water. And they ganged up on Moses and Aaron and demanded they give them water. Her death doesn't even get a whole sentence. It's a half a sentence. She died, and they ran out of water. Couldn't they have given her an obituary? Couldn't they have waited at least a day after her death before engaging in a rebellion against Aaron and Moses? She didn't even get a day of mourning, Miriam. Now, Miriam, when we look at her life, she'd be a faithful servant. She was the one who guarded Moses as he floated down the Nile. She was the one who came forward and persuaded the daughter of Pharaoh to hire the real mother of Moses to be his nursemaid. She was the one who led the Israelites in dance and song after the crossing of the sea. She served her people faithfully for 40 years. So why then is she treated, we could almost say, coldly? She's ignored at the end. For Aaron, they're going to mourn 30 days. It says so. For Moses, they're going to mourn. Why no mention of mourning for Miriam? So Dr. Brown sees a connection between the way Miriam lived and the way she died. Her life was always for the sake of others. We met her first at the Nile. We met her again at the bank of the Red Sea. She's there to save her brother. She's there to lead the Israelites in song. But the first time she appears, works her charm, makes the deal, and then immediately disappears from the story. The second time she sings, but her song is very brief, just 2 lines, as if her song is not that important. The song that her brother sang, that's recorded in full. Her song is cut off. And then right after her song of the sea, the Israelites ran out of water and rebelled. It's as if they have no time to focus on her song. They need water, they need it quick. Her song is cut off. The focus moves from her to the search for drinkable water. And then when she dies, the same thing happens. No time to mourn her, no time to eulogize her, no time to pay attention to her death. They're thirsty, they need water, and that's the focus. So these 3 incidents in which Miriam and water are somehow connected are what lead the rabbis to say Miriam was the one who provided them water. It doesn't say it directly in the Torah, but it hints at it, because every time there's a lack of water is because Miriam is absent. There was a well, the rabbis say, that traveled with the people of Israel because of Miriam. And then when she died, the well dried up. In the Bible itself, the Israelites do not make that connection between Miriam and water until she dies. When she's gone, they see a connection. And perhaps even they don't recognize or understand the relationship between her death and the lack of water. We're not sure. So Miriam dies pretty much unappreciated. That's how she lived. She was not really appreciated. In a sense, Dr. Brown says, Miriam is like water, unnoticed, colorless, unappreciated until when? When it isn't there. Miriam was not appreciated until she wasn't there anymore. She's a shadow figure in her life. She's a shadow figure in her death. She's unnoticed, unappreciated. She's the woman who works behind the scenes. She's not mourned or appreciated as she should be when she dies. So it is with Miriam, noticed, not appreciated in her life, nor in her death. It's the rabbis who lift her up and make her a very important person in the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Now, Aaron's death is very different. We're told that at Mount Hor, on the boundary of the land of Edom, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, let Aaron be gathered in to his kin. There's a whole announcement that Aaron is going to pass. Then we're told, take Aaron and his son Eleazar, bring him up to the mountain, take the vestments from Aaron, put them on his son Eleazar, and then Aaron shall be gathered to the dead. Moses does what he's commanded. They go up to Mount Hor. Everybody's watching in the sight of the whole community. Moses takes off the vestments from Aaron, puts them on his son Eleazar, and Aaron dies there on the mountain. They come down from the mountain. The whole community realizes Aaron has breathed his last, and they mourn Aaron for 30 days. There's a whole paragraph, not a sentence cut short like in Miriam. Miriam's death got only a few words. Aaron's gets 8 verses, an entire paragraph. But there's a mystery in this story too. Why does he get so many verses and she gets so few? Why does the Torah stress again and again, 4 times, that the whole community saw and that the whole community mourned? It's repeated over and over again. And why the vestments? What's this whole scene that they take his vestments off, they put it on his son? So if you study the life of Aaron carefully, we understand his death. Aaron is forever bound up with the people, for good and for bad. He's their representative to God in the sacrificial system. He organizes the worship. He connects them to their God. His task is not to bring God's word to them, as Moses does. His task is to bring the words of the people to God, their worship of God. And when they insist on having a golden calf, Aaron goes along, reluctantly, but he does go along. He does not want to confront them. Aaron is not a creature of confrontation. He never confronts them. He loves the people unconditionally, and what happens in return? They love him unconditionally. That's why when he dies, they mourn for him for 30 days. We hear nothing about the mourning for Miriam. For Moses, interestingly enough, they only mourn 7 days. For Aaron, 30. Why? Because Moses was the one who chastised them. He rebuked them. He corrected them. He was their instructor. He made demands. Aaron was the compromiser. Aaron was the peacemaker, the friend. They loved him more. Unlike Moses, Aaron makes time for his children. And so unlike Moses, Aaron has children who are willing and able to take his place. Moses' children completely disappear from the scene. No leadership role whatsoever. Aaron must have been envied by his brother. The Midrash says that Moses took Aaron with words of comfort. He said to him, "You have a privilege that I will never have. You will see your children willing and able to take your place." So Aaron died as he lived in 3 ways. He was bound up with the people in his life, and they were bound up with him when he died. He was quiet and calm and non-confrontational in his life. He was quiet and calm and non-confrontational in his death. Remember, when Moses is told you're not going into the land of Israel, he screams. He fights to the bitter end. He argues with God. Aaron doesn't say a word. It's time. It's time. No argument from Aaron. He lived in and by means of those vestments. He was the Kohen his whole life. And he made the transition to the next Kohen in front of everybody by transferring to him the vestments when he died. Not so Moses. Of him, the Torah says, Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor was his natural forces abated. He was so full of vigor. So Erica Brown says that Moses leaves the stage exactly the way he entered it, kicking and screaming all the way, defiant, right? He's saved from the death knell of Pharaoh. He confronts, remember the Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave? He confronts him. The next day, 2 Israelites are fighting, he confronts them. They turn on him and they say, "Who made you leader over us?" Something that they will say over and over and over again. Moses, who made you leader over us? We just read Korach. Who made you leader over us? That scene foreshadows the rest of Moses' life. The rebellions, the bickering, the squabbling, the quarreling that he will have to deal with all 40 years in the wilderness. As his life was full of fighting, so was his death. 4 times he's told he's going to die outside the land, and 4 times he refuses to accept the decree and argues with God. He protests. He tries to move heaven and earth in order to persuade God to let him live long enough to enter the land. We're never told if Miriam protested. She didn't get to enter the land either. Aaron accepted the decree quietly, peacefully, not Moses. In the Bible, even more in the Midrash, Moses fights with every argument he can muster. He uses every bit of influence he can think of. It's fruitless. He dies on the other side of the Jordan. In the Midrash, Moses begs and bargains. Let me be Joshua's assistant, right? He's willing to, I'll take a demotion. I'll be Joshua's assistant. Just let me go into the land. Or let me be a bird, the Midrash says. Let me just fly over and look at the land. Then I'll return and die on this side. But let me enter the land. And God says no. So just as Moses lived a lonely life, he has no connection with his wife anymore. He has no connection with his children. His brother and his sister Miriam and Aaron, remember a few weeks ago, they rebelled against him. The people are always criticizing him. He was very, very lonely. He died alone as well, on top of the mountain. Not Aaron. Aaron dies in the sight of all the people, not Moses. He dies alone. Who's there? Only God. Because the only one who stuck with him to the end was God. They were best friends. They argued, they fought, but in the end, they accomplished the mission together, and God buries him and mourns for him. He is buried not on the top of a mountain like Aaron, but in the valley. And no one knows the place of his grave until this day. We know the mountain that Aaron was buried on. If you travel in Jordan, they'll point it out to you. The Bible says that Moses died in full vigor because he lived his life in full vigor. He fights the people for the sake of God. He fights God for the sake of the people. He fights injustice. So he lashed out at the Egyptian taskmaster. He intervenes with the quarreling Israelites. He confronts Pharaoh. He confronts the strongest person on the face of the earth. And when he's punished, he fights back. So here we have them, these 3 ancestors of ours who each died the way they lived. Miriam spent her life in the service of others, never appreciated, never really noticed, and she dies that way. Not appreciated, not noticed. Aaron lived bound up with the people, and he died that way, bound up with the people. Moses lived his life alone, but fighting against injustice, and he died that way, alone, fighting against injustice. The injustice of having led his people so far, so long, and then being cut down before they reach their goal. Aaron lived as a public figure. he died as a public figure. Moses lives steadfastly, refusing to compromise. He dies refusing to compromise. Miriam lived providing water to a people that didn't thank her. She died the same way. Who knows? Maybe that's why her name is Miriam, a composite of two words, mar and yam, water and bitterness. So these three great leaders of the Exodus from Egypt and the wandering in the desert teach us about life and death. They were all great, all different. Their lives and their deaths reflected these truths, and their stories and their memories have indeed been passed down, and all of them remain a blessing to the Jewish people for millennium, having taught us so much about life and about death. Shabbat Shalom.